All right, welcome everybody to another episode of Go Fast, Grow Fast, where we talk about growing revenue for businesses. Today, I am excited to talk to Sudeep, a great background. I've had multiple conversations with her, and I can tell you this is going to be a fun one. So Sudeep, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much, Sean, for setting this up. I'm so excited to be finally talking one-on-one and in a casual way when we can still talk shop. I'm very excited at that possibility. It's great to be here. In terms of, sorry, you were saying?
Oh, no, absolutely. I'm glad you're here. And I'm excited for if you're going to give us a drum demonstration at some point, during this podcast.
I mean, if you stop recording, I can do it because I'm self-conscious. But no, yeah, that's my drum. It's called the dhol. It's a tonal language thing. So it has a weird spelling, but that's how it sounds, TOLL, basically. And it's one of those things that once it starts playing, your shoulders, you lose control over them because they just start going.
Amazing.
So I've been learning since the beginning of this year. I was hoping to start lessons last year, but then, life. So I'm about 2 months into lessons, and nice. I'm the only one in the world who's going to say this, but I'm getting pretty good.
All right. Well, we'll do it. We'll record after this a little session, and then in another 6 months, we'll record another session. We'll do it before and after. It'll be great.
Yep.
Well, you want to give people an idea of your background, what your experience is, who you are?
Yeah, so I'm a fractional CMO. I work right now with a couple companies, and then I'm a marketing consultant as well. My background is in Fortune 500, so I started my post-MBA career in marketing with Unilever, and I am extremely biased. I still believe it's the best university for marketing, business, and I think just the CPG space as well. So from there, I did the craziest thing that someone would do when they're doing well in a very, prestigious, well-paying, great job with great people is leave. So I set up with my friends from university. I'd gone to engineering school. So I set up with these friends a video advertising company because we arrived almost by accident at this conclusion that advertising equals business and making video ads equals, that creative muscle always feeling exercised and that thirst always being quenched. So I led the business and strategy marketing. At a small company, it's a bootstrap startup, and we started out just as the 3 partners. That's all there was to it. And so it's a lot of fuzziness between what you do, but I was accountable for marketing, strategy, and business development. Did that for 5 years, extremely successful, won a lot of awards for our work, won a lot of clients, happy clients, I hope all of them. And then also started doing a little bit of marketing consulting on the side just to be able to have that experience because I was energized by the idea of working with clients on a little bit more than just their video strategy. So started doing that. During that process, moved from India to Seattle. And so now I'm here in the Pacific Northwest. I'm close to family finally, but anyway, and I've doubled down on the fractional work since then, just because it's a wider accepted idea here. So I mostly work with small and medium businesses, and I love to work with them on their strategic positioning stuff. So really defining and going deep into who are you really? Why do customers care? Who are these customers that really care? What is the value that you bring by doing something that you're the best in the world at? And I can go on and on about that, but I'm going to stop here.
No, that's great. Let's dive right on in because you just brought up brand and positioning, but in the world of SMB. And there's some strong allergies to the word brand in the small, medium business world because brand sounds like a lot of money into a black hole that doesn't produce revenue. So tell me first, what does brand mean to you? Because, there are some different, definitions out there. People approach it differently. What does brand mean to you and why is that so important for the clients that you work with?
Yeah, I love the word allergy. I think it's mostly a misinterpretation of some things, but you're right. There's definitely that allergy, and especially in the B2B universe where a lot of people think we don't need a brand. I'm not in that space. But anyway, so there's, like you said, there's a bunch of definitions for the word brand. I the more I've advanced in my career, the lower my readability level of what I say goes. So I now talk at like a 6th grade level. So at that level, I would say, one, it's a set of promises. So what is something that you're committed to that is never amiss from anything you do? So if you're, say, a SaaS product, is your promise around customer service? If you're a DTC, say, food brand, is your promise that you will never lie about the health benefits, or even if it's unpleasant, the health, breakdown, the nutritional info about your products? So one, it's a promise. Two, more from the angle of the customers and the market in general. What are people saying about you when you're not in the room? So if, let's say, you're Amazon, are people talking about that one story where they got a crazy, customer support experience? Is that what they talk about? Is what they talk about the fact that whatever they need is at their doorstep within 2 days, and it could be literally anything under the sun? So what is it that stands out to people about you, and what is it that they understand from whatever you're saying to them? So as much as marketers, and especially brand marketers, would like to believe, we don't own any brand. Your company doesn't own the brand. It can coach the brand, it can steward the brand in a certain direction, but the brand really lives in the minds of your customers and your consumers. And specifically when we talk about small and medium businesses, a brand doesn't mean a TV campaign during the Super Bowl, which is, millions of dollars of investments, or even on other days. That's not what it is. It's also not as small or as minimal as a visual identity. It's not the sum of all of your products. It's all of these things and a little bit more. So I think at the essence, it's your purpose of why do you exist? And a lot of times, especially with newer companies, startups, when I work with them on establishing what their brand is, because it's usually, in a lot of cases, not very deliberately defined, it comes from the story of, why did this company come to exist? Why did you as a founder or a set of people decide that there's a problem in the market that I want to solve? And in most cases, solutions to a lot of problems do exist. They may not be the best solutions, but those solutions exist. So what is it that made you drop everything else and put all of your, life into this? So a lot of times that story ties in very closely with the brand's promise. And that's where you then pick it up from.
So that all sounds hard.
It is.
That's great for Amazon and their budget, and they can think about all this as an SMB, a small team that's already overworked. Why? First off, why should I start digging into this? And then how? How do I start digging into this?
Yeah, the why is, that's the question behind everything, right? As marketers, we're trained to talk about the why first before we go into the what and the how. So the why is, one, we live in a climate where everybody has competition, and there's so much uncertainty in how consumers or customers feel, how the economy is going to be, what might happen to your company tomorrow. So I think the one thing that'll stick is brand. So I know we're talking about smaller brands here, but just for a quick example, if Coca-Cola were to lose all of their distribution system, all of their factories, even the secret formula for their drinks, it was wiped out with an earthquake or something, tomorrow the brand Coca-Cola will still exist. They could get all of that other stuff up to speed and back and running again in almost no time, and the brand would still stay throughout that. They could lose all of their people, and the brand would still say, that would be extremely tragic. But you get the point that the brand kind of survives beyond all of that. So then back to, smaller businesses, what happens if you run a business and tomorrow a bigger company gets into that same space and they have the resources that are 1 million times than what you can even dream to have? Yep. Is there a reason your customers will choose to stay with you? And there's always that, we like to pretend that all of our decisions are very logical and very rational, but there's no such thing as a rational consumer, coming from that economics kind of perspective. That doesn't really exist. There's always that fuzziness. There's always that element of emotion. And that's where the brand comes in too, whether it's emotion or sometimes a lot of brands are built on functional things. So your brand is the way that you survive in the market. And of course, that's what strongly built brands do. If they're kind of based on a very, unstable kind of foundation, that doesn't really work. But you need a strong brand because that's what's going to help you survive and thrive against, so many external and internal factors that you have no control over. And how? I think...
Pausing on that to emphasize your point a little bit, I think in the B2B world, in the enterprise world especially, the best example that I like to use... Oh, hello, Mr. Dog.
Sorry about my puppy here.
Yeah, you have an office mate. That's great.
I do. He keeps me accountable.
He has some important things to say about brand. I
does.
Understand. But
sorry about that, though.
No worries. I think the best example that I like to give is this idea that in the enterprise world, nobody ever got fired for buying an IBM product.
Yeah.
Right? Or for buying Salesforce or buying HubSpot. Like, you don't get fired for buying the name brand, even if that project ends up not being every feature you want and everybody's happy with it. You're not going to get fired because they're the brand that everybody trusts, right? And I think that's one of the biggest examples is if you can become the brand that nobody gets fired for buying, you've achieved a level of pricing power that your competitors won't be able to match.
Yeah, and you basically get all of the luxury of being a monopoly without the FTC coming after you.
Or maybe eventually they might come after you, but that's a great problem to have. And we all want that problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And all right, so going back to the second part of your question about the how.
Yep.
Like I said, a lot of times, if especially if you come from a mindset where you don't really have a lot of marketing knowledge or maybe training, you would think, oh, I don't have a brand. I don't have anything to say. The only thing I can put out on, my content marketing platforms is, functions and features and all of that stuff. But you do. If you dig a little bit deeper into the DNA of what your product is, and like I said, I think it's a great place to start when you think about the promise. What is something that you always deliver to customers? And as a company grows, as product lines grow, as variants of things grow, as you maybe acquire other companies or people, etc., what is one thing that has stayed unchanged about your brand? Talk about that. And so there's a lot to be said about that DNA. There's a lot to be said when people love transparency in general, right? So if you're able to share, in terms of if I look at it this way of looking for content opportunities, just as you go about your day. What are the problems you face today? How did you solve a challenge that seemed insurmountable? Talk about all of those things. And that's how, brand building starts. And it's one of those things that you cannot do it after the fact. If you are, let's say, building a startup today and you have a $0 budget or less, you cannot tell yourself, you know what, let's get to a revenue level of this much ARR, or let's get to a profit level of this much, or let's hire these many people, and then we'll start building the brand. That's not how it works.
Right.
Even if you have, $10 to spare. And like I said, a lot of things you can actually do at $0. It takes a lot of time. But, that's where AI tools come in and help a little bit too.
Right.
You start today, or hopefully you start yesterday, but there's always a today.
Yeah.
And it can be, of course, if you have an experienced strategist that helps you out, it becomes a lot easier because they're trained and they have the experience in doing this over and over. That's helpful. If you don't have anything on your team, let's say you're a tech company, you're just a bunch of engineers. If you have nothing that even closely resembles marketing on your team, you can still do it. Open up a little bit.
I think one of the parts of branding that gets overlooked a lot, and in my view is vitally important in the early days, as you're really trying to grow, is the positioning part.
Absolutely.
Of branding, right? And understanding the shape of the market you're in, and that influences pricing. It influences feature sets as you're building out product. It influences the type of content that you even talk about. So how do you think about positioning in the early days, and how do you work through that with CEOs?
Yeah. So before I talk about that, I do want to bring up this example that this is not something I unearthed. I read this probably on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, really stuck with me just to illustrate the power of positioning. So all of these products, there's Otter, Firefly, etc., that are meeting recorders are positioned in a certain way that they take notes. They then give you, insights, keys, screen shares, and all of that. There's another product in the sales domain called Gong, which analyzes the conversations your salespeople has and then gives them feedback on, hey, at this time you were talking too much, at this time you got argumentative or defensive. So they generate all of that feedback for you. It's 90% the same product. One sells for 10 or 20 bucks a month because the benefit that it offers you is I don't have to take meeting notes anymore. I don't have to be writing or typing them myself. And I also don't have to go back to them to generate a Cliff Notes version, to generate, minutes at the meeting, etc.
It's a nice to have.
Exactly. So it's a multivitamin. It's not Advil.
Right.
The other one is my sales team cannot perform without this. So those guys can charge many times over for almost the same product. I'm not discounting the fact that it's different, it's a better product,
Sure.
but the bones are the same. So that's basically what positioning is. And to go back a little bit, the idea of positioning is it's a sum of many things that are interrelated. So they're all in a circle. They're not linearly placed. So one is, what is the value that you offer? What is the thing that you're best in the world at? And I've learned a lot from April Dunford about positioning. Yep. So that's a recommendation for anyone interested. She has a podcast. The new season's just coming out. She has books, audiobooks. She's very active on her LinkedIn and stuff.
She's been doing this for a long time. She knows her stuff.
Exactly. And she really knows what she's talking about. She's done every version of, B2B marketing, positioning, product marketing, all of that stuff. So kudos to her and my thanks to her too. So the sort of framework I've learned for her, and this is again something that a marketer would be able to do better, but anybody can do it. There's nothing here that requires technical training in marketing. So a lot of those factors that I was talking about, those elements that are interrelated. One, what are we the best in the world at? Which would be basically the sum of all of the features that you offer as a product, as a service, as a piece of software. What is the value of this to people? Is this saving time for them? Is this removing a lot of back and forth communication with stakeholders? Is this automating something that they otherwise have to spend a lot of manual time on? Is this enabling them to work at a higher level as opposed to what they were, whatever it is? Because people don't care about features. They care about what those features are able to unlock in their lives, what problems they're able to solve. The other element is, who are the people that care the most about it? So for example, in that Gong versus the AI note takers space, salespeople really care about every single word that is said by a salesperson in a pitch meeting. Other kind of people probably don't really have that high stakes involved here. So they're not really, hanging on every single word. What is the market that we want to compete in? So are we trying to sell the software to, salespeople at investment banks? Or are we selling it to product people at retail companies? And that ties into who are the customers that will derive the most value of it? Because again, the same product could be a multivitamin for one person, but an Advil for another person. So you take all of those things, you sit down with hopefully as many department heads as you can, because it helps to have their perspective brought into this is not marketing's responsibility alone. Like marketing owns it, but then you need your salespeople to come in and give you the perspective from the other side of the table. And then also the other thing, sorry, I forgot about is the alternatives. So this is, when I say alternatives, I mean one competition, a product that does exactly or almost the same thing that you do, substitutes. So for example, Netflix says that it's not competing just with Hulu and say Prime. They're competing with hiking. They're competing with taking a nap because those are things you do to relax. They're competing with reading. So what are those substitutes? And also in a lot of cases, especially in the B2B universe, what you're competing against is no decision, status quo. You make a great pitch, you're very impressive, your pitch is solid in what it's doing, but what they ultimately, the customers, they ultimately decide is, what, we're just going to keep doing what we're doing because change is hard. We don't want to do it. It's like too much work. So That is how you develop your positioning. And one of my personal litmus test for the strength of your positioning and overall marketing strategy is if you can pinpoint a segment of customers that you don't want to sell to. So if I'm selling, say, clothing, and the whole idea of my clothing is that it looks like business wear, but it's as comfortable as wearing sweats, and there are people that only want to wear high fashion clothing, I don't want to talk to them. I'm never going to be able to convince them, so I don't want to waste my resources, my energy on them. I'm going to double down on the people that are still recovering from wearing sweats throughout the pandemic, working from home, but now they have to be back in the office, so they need to look presentable. I'm only going to talk to them, no one else. I'm not going to talk to anyone in, industries that did not really happen. So that's kind of an overview of how I approach positioning. And with, to answer your question about how do I approach this, when I first start any kind of engagement, this is usually my very first step. Because one, I need to understand how the company works. And especially when you come as a fractional executive, the onboarding period you have is not, weeks, it's minutes or days at the most. So you need to hit the ground running. So this is the thing that I do that one gets all of the people working with me, usually CXOs or CEOs, founders. So it gets them to be thinking about all of these and critically, breaking apart and poking holes in whatever they have so far. And then two, we get all of the people together to contribute to what is going to be the foundation for everything. And once you have a solid positioning, and the idea is not to come in and be a fancy person that radically comes up with a new positioning. The idea is to be deliberate in whatever your choices are, rather than we just kind of arrived at this because that's just how the company operated in early days. So you set that foundation, and then that is what dictates everything that builds on top of it. So all of your marketing activities, all of your brand building, advertising, sales techniques, then use that foundation of a solid positioning statement to translate whatever they're doing.
Yeah. Well, I think, a theme that has come up multiple times in these conversations is alignment amongst your team.
Yeah.
And understanding your brand and positioning, especially as an early team, just going through that exercise goes a long ways towards achieving alignment. Are we talking about the same thing? And are we all targeting the same people? You mentioned as a fractional coming in, the idea isn't about coming up with some brand new positioning that's amazing. It's about unearthing what are you guys already doing naturally that you just haven't talked about.
Exactly. That's so accurate. And that actually is something that with one of my recent clients that I signed on last summer, it was exactly that. They were actually doing a great job business-wise. Everything was in good health. But they realized that it's all been kind of haphazard. In a lot of ways, I can't actually say why this client chose to work with me. And I don't want to rely on just that. So I want to build a solid foundation for what I do so I can reliably predict what's going to happen to my business as opposed to this just fell into my lap. So I'm super happy.
Yep. Yeah. If you can't answer those kinds of fundamental questions, you never get to that predictability. And I find that's kind of the differentiator or kind of it's a tier that you have to get to is when you're first starting out, you are kind of haphazard. You're just trying to do as many things as you can and trying to find
your goal is survival at that stage.
Yeah, your survival, discover what you can. But when you're ready to hit a certain level of scale, you need predictable revenue growth, or at least some level of predictable. And you'll never get there if you don't start answering these questions.
Yeah. And I think, speaking to alignment, just getting a lot of people together in a room and listening to them. So I, as a marketer, let's say I listen to every single thing that the salesperson or the operations person said, even if that doesn't show up in the final output that I have in terms of my positioning, statement, just by getting them to be heard that goes a long way. Instead of if you say, hey, we've sat in a room and we've come up with something and now all of the sales decks are changing, your entire sales process is changing, please follow this. There's so much resistance to that as opposed to we heard you. And there may be, an opportunity where not all of that feedback is taken and incorporated into what you do for several reasons, but just by being heard, that just sets you up for building alignment a lot better.
Yeah, that does go a long way, listening. And that's true of customers too, especially early customers, right? Just showing we're listening to you. We hear the features you want, and we're working on a roadmap for you. That goes a long ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think marketing, it's such a huge function and it's misunderstood by a lot of people. But if you really drill it down back to, sixth grade level readability, it's bringing the voice of the customer into the organization. That is your job. A lot of people measure it differently. A lot of people define it differently. A lot of people operate differently, but that's essentially what you need to be doing.
Yeah. And I think that I've had multiple conversations about this as well, is that misunderstanding of the point of marketing, right? And marketing versus sales versus product, and where does marketing end and sales begin and customer success begin? How are those different, or how are they the same? And you mentioned, in the current, economic climate, there's a lot of uncertainty. And so when you start thinking about, all right, we need to cut our budget for this year. Well, where do we make those cuts? Well, brand is a super wishy-washy thing. We don't really need that. That's for the long term. Let's cut that, And then what else? Well, we can't cut sales. They have to go make sales, but we can cut all this marketing budget. Like, how do you think about that? How have you dealt with that with customers?
I mean, obviously, I don't like hearing that, right? I would say that's the worst thing to do if you're thinking of cutting your brand, your marketing budget, because like you said, brand is a long-term thing. If you're in business and your idea is, I'm going to do this for 2 years and then stop doing it, maybe don't even bother about the brand. Just like double down all of your energies in the product, customer service, sales, whatever else remains. But if you're in it for the long haul, you basically don't have a choice. And I think it's a lot of cost cutting, especially in the marketing universe. I read this stat that about 40% of all digital marketing budgets, they don't even end up with like Google or Meta, who you're advertising with. They end up in the middle. So all of these middlemen, systems, because Google Ads has become so complicated that you need people to figure out how that works. You can't just have one performance marketer, do the work and then expect it to have great results. So there's a lot of these products that are sitting in the middle. And of course, they're solving problems. There's a reason they exist. But there's a lot of inefficiencies that you can cut down on. And instead of saying, I will cut down all of my budget that goes into brand building or any other aspects of marketing and everything else stays, I think that's a good time to take account of your costs overall. I'm sure there's inefficiencies in your sales system. And because I've had experience being a bootstrapped entrepreneur, and we were profitable from year 2. But even then, every single decision around if I'm buying my computers where I'm going to edit my video, I can only get Apple's top SKU. I don't have the choice to work with, a MacBook Air. I need that, Mac Pro or advanced systems. But I can make a compromise on how large my office space is. I can make a compromise on no, plastic drinking bottles again. That's actually something we used to do during video shoots. Everybody was used to just these plastic drinking bottles that they just toss when they're done. That was convenient. It was the thing they were used to in the industry. This one day we just put our foot down. That's it. We're going to have, water stations all over, and everybody has their own bottle. There's a label with your name on it. If you're an actor, you're sitting in your position where you have to be. Someone will bring that water to you. If you're anyone else, just go there and fill it yourself. So anyway, my point is be ruthless with every single cost you have, and of course within the whole marketing space too, but even outside, there's a lot of inefficiencies to be discovered. I actually have a friend who does this as a fractional executive. He goes into companies and identifies inefficiencies, and he tells me that he usually reduces costs by at least 20% when he's done. Any kind of company, any kind of life stage, he realizes if you've been in operations for a few years, there's no way that you're doing things efficiently anymore. And then, like I said, going back to brand stuff, even if you cut your budget down to 0, you're still probably running ads to attract business. Can you infuse a little bit more brand personality there? Can you look at these scrappy ways of identifying what can I still do if my budgets are 0, and then go back to what you may have done in the early days?
Yep.
I'm sure if you've done the job right, you have some lessons that as you scaled, you just kept scaling those budgets too. But it does work sometimes at lower budgets too.
Yeah.
I do accept it's hard. It's not an easy challenge at all. But what my submission is brand and marketing stuff should not be the first thing to lose budgets, because that is what you need for the long haul. And that is, in some cases, what you actually need to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. We do, as humans, tend to focus on the short term, right? And short-term outcomes. And it only gets worse if you're a public company where you're judged on your quarterly results. And I think it was Jeff Bezos in one of his shareholder letters, he said something along the lines of, there's nothing I can do to impact this quarter. I'm thinking about 2 years out, right?
Yeah.
Like that's where you actually have impact. And that's true of small business too, which nobody wants to hear that answer. It's we need help now, not 2 years from now. But
exactly,
reality is what it is. And I think talking about operational efficiency naturally segues into AI and how are you using AI in your day-to-day or with clients, or how are you not using AI as well?
Yeah. So a lot of stuff with chatbots, which is anytime I'm doing anything, I think, what is a part of this that can be delegated? So if I'm putting together, let's say, if I just focus on content marketing, if I'm putting together a blog, a LinkedIn post, an invite for a webinar, what are some things that I can outsource very easily to an AI system? And the chatbots are super easy because it's a lot easier to give feedback, and it's a lot easier to have your prompt saved and then go back to them. So that's definitely a big one. Where I'm not using is, I don't like using AI systems, at least in the state that they are available today, to complete almost any task end to end. So if I want to tell an AI chatbot to come up with continuing the same example, with my content marketing strategy, create a calendar, segment what I'm going to do across channels, tell me a plan of across the entire funnel where what kind of content piece sits, and then also generate the content, it's going to do I don't even want to say above average job of anything. It's going to do like a really shoddy job of the whole thing. So I try to identify what is it where I have my bottlenecks, or what is it where I need support. So I do enjoy copywriting, for example. I enjoy conversion copywriting. I enjoy the more creative copywriting. And I love taking a red pen to people's writing and poking holes in what they've done, grammar, usage, all of that stuff. So if I really enjoyed that, and that is something that adds value because I infuse the brand's personality in a subtle way in that stage, I don't want to have AI do it. But if what I struggle with is coming up with new ideas, I'll just feed all of my clients, let's say blog posts and LinkedIn posts and all of the thought leadership stuff they've done into the system and say, tell me 10 ideas that work for the same tone of voice. And that's the only thing that I outsource, and then I take on the rest. So everything that happens before and after, I do it by myself. So, and I'll also, this is more tech stuff. With audio and video, I feel like the friction is a little bit more, because a prompt that generates a super realistic or artistic, whatever you're going for, and super accurate thing with text on it that is not misspelled or does not look like it's written in Russian, the effort to get there is a lot more than generating just an image. So, which is where then I realized, hey, can I use a stock image and then just use Canva to manipulate what it looks like to better suit my objectives? Or can I do it the opposite way? That I get, if it's something that doesn't even exist in a stock image, can I get, say Bing or DALL-E to generate that image for me, and then I'll manipulate it a little bit myself. Right. So I think I'm always looking for ways to balance what portions of the work are easiest to delegate and take the least amount of effort, versus what is just better for me to do because there's just too much supervision required.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then, of course, for my internal efficiencies too. So my most recent example is I had a networking meeting that I had gotten after a lot of work with someone. So I fed basically everything in the public domain about them to a chatbot and said, act as this person and have a 15-minute chat with me. And then I put in some things that I wanted to talk about and some questions I had for them. And I said, just play out this conversation. I will respond as myself. You respond as this person. And I just kept going with them. I actually went on for much longer than 15 minutes because I was typing, but I just had that conversation to kind of warm myself up and to understand how this person might segue from one topic to the other and what their interests might be and how I can participate in that. And that conversation actually went pretty well.
Yeah. It's funny because just this morning I was chatting with someone and we were joking that it's only a matter of time before our virtual agents are the ones on this Zoom call talking to each other and we're still asleep in bed. I mean, it's inevitable.
Exactly. That's really the place. That exact use case is the place where I'm really waiting for things to get in a way that it's, reliable and in some way privacy risks are a little bit lower. But I basically want to have a second brain that is fully transported into my agent.
Yep.
And then have that agent do meetings and report back to me on how they went, what their decisions were, where they struggled, and all of that. And I can then be in 1,000 places at the same time.
Yep. Exactly. No, that's great. Well, we're kind of coming up on time here, and I always like to ask if you have any recommendations for our audience, whether it's books or podcasts or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I already talked about all of the great stuff that April Dunford does, positioning wise and just overall marketing wise. And her specialization is in B2B, but I think there's a lot of great stuff if someone happens to be in the B2C space. A book that I've been reading, I've actually been reading it for months now because my default way to read any book is like it's a mystery thriller. So with this one, I've been deliberately slowing myself down just to make sure I absorb it a little bit better. I chew on what I learn. And the book is called Quantum Marketing. It's by Raja Manar, who is the CMO of MasterCard for many years now, actually, and a leading voice in marketing. I have my Kindle is from 2011 or something. Hold on, that's the wrong page.
Like antique?
That's the cover.
Great.
The thing is, I totally want to get on a soapbox about this because I actually have a Kindle Oasis and I use this one way more. That one was a gift. And I wanted to give this one away, but I realized I just like this one so much better. And it's actually one of the models that did not have any kind of lighting on the screen. So that's my only problem with it, that I need to clip on a light to read at that time. But anyway, so Quantum Marketing, Raja Manar is a great book. So he talks about the fact that, this whole idea of marketing as a function has grown and it's gotten fragmented. It's almost going through this identity crisis. So he breaks down what he thinks is the future of marketing. And then the word, the name of the book comes from the fact that when classical physics failed, we got quantum physics to describe things that we could not explain otherwise, the uncertainties in what happens in the atom, for example. So the quantum marketing, philosophy explains stuff that classical marketing kind of fails at, which is why, because classical marketing did not evolve to include stuff like social media and TikTok causing the whole Stanley craze and that kind of stuff. And of course, definitely not AI and, everything being connected. So that's a definite recommendation.
That's great. That's a really good recommendation. That book has been on my list for a while, so I guess I need to actually go finally read it. So I'll move it up my list.
Yeah, it's not a difficult read. It's not, academically dense or anything. It's a fairly easy read. But like I said, I'm forcing myself to take my time with it just because there's a lot to learn. There's a lot that inspires, further research. I go down a couple of rabbit holes when I read stuff from it. But yeah, you should definitely push it up your list.
All right. I definitely will. Well, I've really appreciated your time here today. This conversation's been great. Diving into branding and positioning, it's really great. And I hope that people are listening and taking it to heart and understanding how valuable this is, no matter what stage your business is at. It will have an impact. Are there any other kind of closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
Stay curious, stay open. I think that's a good lesson that all of us can learn, especially in a world that's changing so fast, and specifically with AI, right? This whole fear of it's coming for our jobs. Open yourself up to, if it is coming for our jobs, we really cannot do much, but the least you can do, the least you owe to yourself to do is be open and curious and actually figure out what's going on.
Yeah, I think that's
dip your
really
toe
good
a little
advice.
bit.
And the bare minimum is go ask ChatGPT about it, just
Exactly. That's the easy thing, right? If you realize, hey, all of that stuff is prompt engineering, I have no idea what that is. Go ask ChatGPT, hey, I need your help with XYZ. Tell me a series of prompts that'll do it. I know nothing about either code or prompts. This is my first conversation with a chatbot. Help me. It actually will do a way better job than you can imagine. And OpenAI now actually lets you do the same stuff without even having an account. The friction is like so low right now.
There's no
I think everyone, exactly. You owe it to yourself because if your job is getting lost to AI, you don't want to be the first one who loses their job. You want to be the last one. I mean, at the very least.
I think that's great. And the only way you're going to learn is through doing it. So just go try.
Exactly.
Well, Sudeep, thank you so much again. This has been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to many more future conversations.
Thanks so much, Sean. I always enjoy talking with you. It's always very energizing, and I love the kind of conversations that we're able to have, and I'm very thankful that we were able to set this up, and I hope listeners get some value out of it too.
I'm sure they will. Well, and if not, too bad. They'll just have to keep listening and try harder, you know? Well, thank you again, and we'll talk again soon.
Yeah, thanks, Sean. Have a good one.